The share, the anniversary in Italy, a town outside of Sicily, will be celebrated next month. Vincent belonged to the family and was a made man. Antonio, who is the current head of the family in Chicago, went to the wedding out of respect for his cousin. The wedding was exactly what was imagined, featuring a sizable Italian celebration with an abundance of food, wine, and beverages, as well as dancing into the wee hours of the morning. Throughout the evening, there was a lot of drinking, dancing, fighting, and laughs. Antonio had feelings for a young lady named Elise Fellini, who was one of the wedding waiters. She was employed by the Marconi family for many years and attended many of their special events. Her family was modest and impoverished. They performed odd chores as needed, cleaned houses, and served at weddings. The villagers and locals in the area feared, revered, and gave freely to the Marconi family. Antonio spent the entire evening observing the girl and discovered that she was precisely the kind of woman he was seeking. A young, attractive, naive girl who was content to leave her difficult life behind and knew her place. With permission from the family, Antonio courted the young woman for the next week. The idea that their daughter would advance and escape the impoverished world she was ensnared in excited them. Antonio had to fly back to Chicago for business, but after discussing his intentions with Johnny, he made the decision to come back a month later to see Elise. Following Johnny's blessings, Antonio took off for Sicily, where he was reunited with the Fellini clan. They gladly accepted when he asked her father for her hand in marriage. As a token of appreciation for his family and his daughter's hand, Antonio was kind enough to promise the family that he would help them and replace the money Elise made on a monthly deposit. Taking care of the family was customary and did not pose a financial burden for Antonio. Her younger sister Lucia served as her maid of honor during their tiny wedding. At just 16 years old, Lucia surpassed her stunning sister Elise in beauty. After an amazing wedding, Elise boarded her first flight in first class to her new home in the United States 2 days later. Her and her family had lived in an 800-square-foot home for those years. The 7,000-square-foot mansion on the lake was a long cry. Elise found it difficult to adjust to the opulent surroundings and household staff. It required Antonio and the family to help her realize where she fit in and that their way of life was typical. Elise, both anxious and excited, discovered that the following year was a blur of transition. She had to become more fluent in English, pick up new traditions, and accept that she was now Antonio Marconi's wife rather than a servant of inferior status. She received assistance from her cousins and other family members in acclimating to the American way of life, and soon she was fully engaged in salon visits, shopping, and meal preparation. Elise was experiencing the happiest moment ever. She was all Antonio could have dreamed of in a marriage, and he could not be happier. As promised, Antonio looked after her family in her native country, traveling there twice a year with Elise. Elise accepted her new existence over the course of the following 5 years, relishing in country club outings, tennis lessons, spa treatments, and all the comforts of a luxurious lifestyle. Because their little girl married into the Marconi family, her family back home also benefited greatly from Antonio's generosity and were able to move into a larger home with more amenities than they could have ever imagined. After 5 blissful years, their life together was content and joyful. They were now attempting to become parents and establish a family. Elise met Randy at the country club one day while out with a friend. Enthralled by her attractiveness and distinctive accent, he extended an employment offer to her, stating that his company required a translator for a few of their clients and that her presence would infuse the office with an extra touch of elegance. Though she wasn't searching for work, she was flattered by his offer and first accepted, intrigued by the idea of using her Italian translation skills for something other than day spas and shopping. She would have just a few hours a week to prove to Antonio and everyone else that she wasn't just a pampered wife. Elise felt bad about taking without giving back, so she begged Antonio to let her work and support their family. Antonio clarified that the wives did not work in their household and that the men's job was to supply. After much deliberation and disagreement, Antonio finally gave in and told her she could work as long as their relationship remained unchanged. He made it plain that she would have to resign if he found any problems. Elise was thrilled to be useful and productive once more. She relished the diva lifestyle, but she missed the feeling of fulfillment that came from helping others and making a difference. She was able to prove to Antonio how valuable she was and improve as a wife thanks to this chance. She was anxious to impress Antonio with a promotion that Randy had promised her and soon got fully immersed in her work. Reaching that goal would demonstrate to her philanthropic spouse how appreciative she was to be his wife. Elise put in a lot of effort over the ensuing months to ensure Antonio was content and that her work life did not conflict with her personal life. She took care to meet his demands and let him know how much her efforts were valued. Regretfully, she committed a mistake one evening when she informed Antonio that Randy desired to meet for business one day after work. She innocently said to her husband, "Honey, Randy wants to have a dinner meeting after work this week to discuss my job and a possible promotion. I know you don't like me working, but you know how much I enjoy it and how proud it makes me feel," without considering that there could be another meaning. He would look into Mr. Randy after getting a hunch that anything might be wrong when he said, "He wants to take you to dinner, just the two of you." Yes, he said he's too busy at work and needs some private time with me to discuss my performance. Grinning and remaining composed, Antonio said, "Honey, you will not go to dinner with him alone. End of story. If he wants to discuss your work, he can do that at the office. If he has a problem with that, tell him to give me a call. I don't want to hear about this again, do you understand?" That was the last time she brought it up, and she stopped asking questions about her boss's secret meetings. After doing some research on Randy, Antonio decided to keep a closer check on the situation because of what he found out. He planned to speak with Randy during the New Year's Eve celebration, letting him know that he was against his wife and him having secret meetings after work. A week away from the celebration, Antonio was already sick of hearing about her amazing boss and how thrilled she was about their upcoming New Year's Eve celebration at his house. She wanted to have fun since all the girls had told her how great these gatherings were. She went shopping for a frock, got salon services, and looked gorgeous. She laughed at his compliment and kissed him back. "You look very handsome in that tux, Mr. Marconi, and I love you too." Not wanting to drink and drive on that chilly Chicago night, he made arrangements for a limo to take him to the party. Because of the low temperatures and high winds, Antonio didn't want to deal with any car problems that evening. Before Antonio ever got to the party, he was fully aware of Randy. An investigation into his background revealed that he was a former soldier working for a shadowy Blackwater division that was well known for using mercenaries in their operations. All the evidence suggested that Randy was a villain who committed on behalf of the government and should not be treated lightly. Antonio was going to be very watchful that night since he had a horrible feeling about this guy. Elise was excited to present her husband, Randy, who stood 6 feet 6 inches and weighed 280 pounds, to Antonio at the party. Antonio was over 8 inches shorter than Elise. Shaking Randy's enormous hand, Antonio felt little in comparison, realizing at once that Randy was more than simply a possible adversary. When he thought back to some of the earlier months' conversations in which Elise had discussed having secret lunches with her boss up until he made it plain that they had to stop, his intuition reached a fever pitch. She said that it had ceased, but one could only hope that her statement was accurate. Randy owned a sizable estate spread across numerous acres. Along with all the perks that went along with his job, there were more than 15 bedrooms. Money always seemed to be linked in the shady activities that Blackwater was known to run. Antonio could smell the money coming from this place. Antonio saw 6 more Blackwater types. Their scars, tattoos, and general size made them immediately identifiable. Although they all had female partners, it was evident by their behavior and the way they observed the boss and the gathering that their roles were to keep an eye on the party and defend Randy. Midnight was drawing near, and everyone was having a great time. 4 months have passed since the event at Randy's New Year's celebration. It all began when I dropped Elise off to the men's room with Janet, her coworker. When I came back a few minutes later, Elise was nowhere to be seen, so I had a quick look about to see where she might have gone. Perhaps she and Janet had gone to the women's restroom, I reasoned. The sensation of my turning to ice came as I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. I watched, stunned, as she ascended the stairs while clutching Randy's hand. She turned to face me when I shouted out to her, grinned broadly, and said, "I love you." I suddenly understood that her coworkers had witnessed the incident and had looked at me with a knowing pity. Just as I was ready to run after her, 2 of his goons, Aldo and Bruno, grabbed my arms and urged me to calm down and let it happen. They claimed they were under tight orders not to interrupt their employer, the party host. "Antonio, your wife knew about tonight and agreed to this before the party even started. This is just a one-time thing the boss does every year with one of the wives. It's kind of his tradition, and the boss always gets his way. Look, just try to relax, she'll be back before you even know what happened. Then she'll be yours again, but for the rest of this year, she belongs to him. She's worked hard, and she deserves this one time, so just let it go. Don't fight it, and don't think about doing anything heroic. Trust me, it won't turn out well for you. Just sit down and enjoy the food and drinks until she comes back down. Then you can take her home and reclaim what is yours." I was stunned, and it seemed he was getting the message, since they let go of their hold on me as soon as they sensed my relaxation. I instantly launched a vicious into Aldo's causing him to for air and fall to the ground. That was the last thing I remembered before I passed out outside on the patio to a column. After I rendered Aldo unconscious, the other guy, Bruno, apparently knocked me out. Bruno then carried me outside so as not to disturb the celebration, as I found out later. He walked in to see to Aldo and left me there, unconscious, tied to the patio column. Bruno left me alone in the chilly Chicago night, figuring my wife would come for me once she finished with the boss. I felt the coldness on my body and the ache on my face when I came to. I couldn't decide which hurt more, my aching head or the cold. My body was shaking all over, trying to adjust to the freezing cold and wind. I discovered later that I spent more than 30 minutes in minus 15 degrees due to the wind chill. I struggled to understand the pain from the blows and feeling lightheaded, until I looked up and saw that I was strapped down, directly below the bedroom where my wife was seeing her employer. I had to bear the anguish of the knockout blow, the freezing cold, and being thus close to my wife, powerless and in excruciating. When I heard everyone applauding as they ushered in the new year, I genuinely recall praying for the good Lord to take me. Everyone had a fantastic time at the party and celebration, but I was trying to keep my composure when I realized there had been an affair. I saw that my body's core temperature was decreasing after what seemed like an eternity. When no one heard me cry out for assistance, I knew I was in serious trouble. Having grown up in the cold my entire life, I knew exactly what hypothermia was and wasn't. The anguish in my stomach and heart, coupled with the angst I experienced over my wife's humiliation, was tremendous. I felt sorry for myself for a few more minutes until the ache went away and I understood my body was shutting down. The cold was taking its toll, and I might not make it back inside if I didn't get inside soon. After a few minutes, all of my suffering and anguish had finally subsided, so I closed my eyes and slipped into a pleasant darkness. I let go of my anger and embarrassment and welcomed the darkness. The next thing I recall is my beloved but deceitful wife lying over me on a warm carpet wrapped in blankets. She was calling my name and caressing my icy body, making me feel as though I was stuck in a terrible dream from which I had no way out. She screamed, "Antonio, are you okay? Baby, wake up. Somebody, we need more blankets." A sweet voice said, "I'm so sorry they left you outside. They were supposed to take care of you. I'm so sorry, please forgive me. I love you, baby." It sounded like someone from a far-off memory, someone I used to love and adore. I felt kisses on my face. I wanted those remarks to end because they now sounded empty and phony. I wanted to flee from this terrible nightmare and return to the dark. Thankfully, I was unable to reply. All I could feel was a powerful shudder running down my body. She begged for forgiveness and said I'm sorry a few minutes later, and an ambulance came to take me to the hospital. My final memory is of an elderly nurse giving me medicine. It took me until the next day to come to. The night shift nurse noticed that I was waking up, so she came over to my hospital bed about 3 in the morning. Elise had apparently slept in the bed next to me the entire time, never leaving my side. The elderly nurse said, "Welcome back, honey. Your poor wife has been worried sick and hasn't left your side. What in the world were you doing outside in this freezing weather? You're a lucky man to have someone that loves you that much. You'd be surprised what we see here." Yes, she loves me so much, I thought to myself. I wanted to tell the nurse that she's the reason I'm here, but I was too sick with a cough to speak. I saw Elise running to my bed when she heard the nurse talking to me. "You have a lot going on, so don't talk. Just relax and don't try to get up. We're here to help you, and the doctor will be here in a few minutes. Are you all right, sweetheart?" I've been really concerned. As I thought back on what had happened to get to this point in time, I felt a surge of rage that made me want to leap up. Woman who had just ruined my beautiful existence and my entire world. At that point, the doctor showed up, diagnosed me with pneumonia, cardiac arrhythmia, frostbite, and loss of the tips of 2 fingers. The good news was that I would recover fully, which made me wish for my own. I scowled at Elise, who could no longer look me in the eye. My blood pressure was rising, and the doctor saw how upset I was, so they decided to medicate me again, and before long I was back in that pleasant darkness, far from reality, my betrayed wife, and my broken existence. The following day, after learning of my predicament, my cousin Johnny Marconi, the patriarch of the Chicago family that owned multiple enterprises in the city, dropped by. I told Johnny the whole story in a low voice, almost a whisper, because I was having trouble breathing, and he gave me a little pat on the back for taking out one of the goons. And when he told me that my punch had taken out the big man and that Aldo had been admitted to the same hospital because I had permanently damaged his trachea, I smiled for the first time since I had gone to the men's room at the party, right before I saw Elise walking up the stairs, hand in hand with Randy. "Antonio, I know you, and it worries me. How do you intend to proceed?" I had to talk in whispers due to lung injury, so I gestured for him to approach. "Divorce her and end him." "Antonio, let's think this out," he murmured, his countenance sorrowful. "I agree that this individual really needs to change his mindset. Allow me to think of something that could possibly keep you out of jail and provide you with the fulfillment you so well deserve." "Johnny, I could have ended last night," I replied, waving at him and breathing heavily. I was restrained, and I had to watch him carry her to his bed. They knew he was seeing her the whole time, so to make it even more unpleasant, they put me in the cold, directly outside his bedroom window. Even on New Year's Eve, the guy rang in the new year by doing it. It seems to be his way of leaving that enduring legacy, and showing the spouses who was the greater man. What do you suppose I'll be thinking about every New Year's Eve for the rest of my life, Johnny? No, she needs to leave, and this person needs to stop. I don't want to see my unfaithful wife, so please keep her out of this room. Not long after our chat, Johnny directed the nurses not to let Elise return to the room. Elise sobbed, asking me to forgive and understand why I had treated her in such a cruel way, but Johnny refused, telling her to wait until I was ready to see her. When the finally showed up later that day, he apologized for the way the men had treated me, not for seeing my wife, and I would have ripped bare hands. It seems that she didn't know what to do and chose to call her boss, Randy, to inform him that I had thrown her out of the hospital room and was going to divorce her. Antonio, you can't divorce your wife because of what they did to you, even though I know it was terrible. She followed my instructions, so it wasn't her responsibility. She is devastated that you won't let her visit and truly loves you. When you brought up divorce, she became very agitated. He went on, now, I suggest you just rest and get your mind straight, as I looked at him in shock. You'll forget this happened and you won't file for divorce from her. She will continue to be your devoted, content wife and will receive that promotion. As I do with every woman I work with, it was a one-time event, and she's not my type. Trust me, I have no intention of taking her again. I don't like how little her physique is. Not to worry, she still had a great time and a memorable New Year's Eve. I could have blown out every cell in his body with the gaze I was giving him, if looks could end it. Now, quit this nonsense and be the better guy. I've already had a conversation with the hospital administration, and your medical expenditures will be covered by my employer. I have honor, my troops follow a code of conduct, and they were told not to hurt you. I'll cover all of your lost work hours and costs. Elise is outside right now, and I'm going to send her inside. It wasn't her fault, so remember to be kind and forgiving. I advised her what to do that night, as I mentioned before, and women always pay attention to me. Since she is your wife, I want you to treat her with respect. I was forced to listen to this guy because I was too breathless to talk to him, but after he finished his apology, I gestured for him to approach, and I used all my strength to speak directly into his ear and say, in a dark voice, I'm going to end you. This guy is either seriously stupid, imagine that. He expected me to be nice to my cheating future ex-wife. He got up and shook his head, then smiled sympathetically and walked out of the room, leaving Elise in the room a minute later with a delighted expression on hers. When she came to me and said, "Baby," did he explain what happened? I saw tears of delight. Though this was a one-time incident and none of the girls who worked there would do it again, you know I'm all yours and would never do anything like that to you. They all assured me that after I told everything, you would forgive me, so you must. How in the world could I have known that the thing that had taken over my wife's body was there when I was just staring at her? Sweetheart, I know you're upset, but really, it wasn't anything, she went on. He persuaded me that it would be all right and that you would comprehend once you found out he was giving me the promotion, even though I know how you felt about what I said when he requested to meet me. We are going to have children and be together forever, so you cannot divorce me. Not because I was speechless, but rather because I was at a loss for words when it came to this extraterrestrial posing as my spouse. Eventually, I managed to get out only one word, divorce. She just said it again, like if she were using a computer program. No, you can't do that. You know there's nothing going on between us since we love each other so much and what happened was just an isolated incident, according to what he told me he stated to you a few minutes ago. Now, just unwind. When they let you go, I'll take you home and I'll make it right, I swear. Even though my pneumonia was still making breathing difficult, I looked at her once more and simply said, divorce. She sobbed and bolted from the room, leaving me dumbfounded. Had we really gone to the twilight zone when we went to the party? How could things have changed so fast? A few days later, after the politeness and a few cups of coffee, Johnny and his wife Grace visited Elise while I was still in the hospital to see how she was doing and to hear her side of the tale once more. Elise, Antonio told me what happened that night and I wanted to get your side of the story one more time. She looked down, unable to meet Johnny's gaze, and uttered, it was nothing, Johnny. I erred by following my boss's advice and did something foolish. Elise, my cousin told me that while Randy was being held in the same house, you and he had shared a bed, and that everyone there was aware of what was going on. Any truth to that? Well, yes, but it was supposed to be just a one-time thing and I'd be back with him in less than 30 minutes, in time to celebrate the new year and my promotion. But as you know, that didn't happen. I see. You spent New Year's Eve in bed with your boss as your husband was being held down below and ultimately left out in the cold, all while you were adulterating upstairs in your employer's bedroom. You embarrassed your spouse beyond belief and left him alone. Could it be that he wants a divorce? Elise collapsed onto the couch in a fetal position, just sobbing and apologizing. After an hour and numerous cups of coffee, Grace soothed her, and they both left their house, disappointed with the way their encounter had turned out. After 5 days, Johnny wanted to take care of things on his own. As was previously mentioned, the family owned multiple companies. Some are legitimate, while others are dubious. In a seedy part of town, there was a tattoo parlor named the Ink Spot, which was one of those darker side partnerships. That's where the barely awake Randy was delivered by the limo driver. Johnny's limo was waiting for Randy to leave for the day outside his office an hour before dropping him off at the Ink Spot. He observed Grace holding an official government sign bearing his name at 6 p.m. while she was leaving the building. Grace was wearing a very skirt and curious and liking what he saw, he approached Grace to find out what was going on. Johnny had his team conduct some fieldwork before the meeting to learn everything there was to know about Randy's company and his reporting structure. Equipped with this understanding, they implemented their strategy. Grace stated that the boss had set up a dinner appointment as she looked at her cleavage. In the limousine, Mr. Walton is waiting for you. He rushed toward the waiting car. "This way, please," she murmured, gesturing to the open door. "Calm down and you'll live," said the huge man, who was sitting across from Johnny when he woke up. "Give me an excuse to break up with you, I dare you," he insisted. "Who are you, and what's going on?" "My cousin Antonio is my cousin Johnny. You must be familiar with Elise, his wife." "This can't be real, man." "It was nothing, guy. I work with wives. That's what I do. I can see all of my wives. Not a huge concern. Why is this guy acting so strangely? His wife is not my type, so I don't want her." Johnny's ire growing. He nearly did it. This guy was absolutely garbage, and up until the limo pulled up in front of the ink spot, he was thinking about changing his plans. After an hour, Randy could not move when he woke up because he was fastened to a table, his head and body restrained. When he realized he couldn't move and tried to move, he panicked. "Try not to move, we're almost done. If you move, it will not be good for you," the face mask-wearing girl stated, observing that he had opened his eyes. Mario then gave him another, lesser amount of the medication, which did the trick and put him under once more. The word rat was permanently tattooed across the man's forehead in 3-inch thick red letters for the next hour while Randy lay unconscious, strapped to the table, and Sylvia, their most gifted artist, worked on the job. Sylvia was instructed to use the bright red ink and thick lettering to make it difficult to ever remove the tattoo. The bleeding would take several months to heal, but the tattoo would be a permanent reminder of his bad decision to mess with Antonio's wife. After she was done, Randy was put in the limo and Mario him up, breaking several. Randy was startled awake by the harsh landing of the car and the chilly air, and after walking barefoot in the cold for 30 minutes, he eventually passed out on the side of the road, where he was scooped up by one of Chicago's best. Randy might have ended up in the morgue, but luckily Officer Michael Torino had gotten a call from a family member to pick up the vagrant. Randy's life was about to take a major turn when Officer Torino helped the barely conscious man into the squad car. While searching for the man's ID, the officer discovered a 4-ounce bag of X that Mario had left there before they left him on the side of the road. The amount of X was enough to charge Mario with possession. This led to an investigation and warrants being issued for Randy's home and place of business. While Randy was getting his new tattoo, Johnny's crew managed to plant in the Ferrari he kept parked in his garage and a briefcase full of cash and X in his home. Within minutes of the cops searching his house, the dogs discovered the stash. Additionally, Johnny's crew planted another quantity of Bruno's SUV, which was parked on the street after the man returned home. The state of Illinois had a zero-tolerance law, and the red Ferrari, his pride and joy, along with Bruno's SUV, had just become property of the state. Later that night, when the police discovered a suitcase filled with cash and more than 3 kilograms of the big surprise was the 4 kilograms of pure on the front seat of his red Ferrari, now parked in Randy's garage. Randy was handcuffed to the gurney while they worked to warm him back up while the investigation went on. Luckily, he was spared any life injuries, but that tattoo would follow him for the rest of his days, and his run-ins with the law were just getting started. Antonio. When Elise learned that her boss had been she was shocked and couldn't believe her husband could have been involved. She told the police about the incident and mentioned that her husband was divorcing her, which made the police initially suspect her husband. However, after he gave the alibi that he was in the hospital when the attack occurred, they started to suspect the cartel Randy had been working with. After a week of being discharged from the hospital, the divorce papers were finalized and served to Elise at work. She broke down in tears, with her friend Janet attempting to comfort her. When Randy noticed the commotion, he went into her office and became enraged upon learning that Antonio was still pursuing the divorce. Randy decided to confront Antonio and demand that he put aside his ego and end the divorce. "How many times do I have to tell this idiot that I have no desire to take his wife?" Randy thought angrily to himself. She was a horrible bed partner, lying there like a limp fish. Elise was furious with herself for her naive belief that Antonio would understand her actions that night. Everyone had assured her that her husband would be forgiving, and she had believed everything would work out. Now, she was facing the painful reality of a divorce from the man she loved. Elise tried calling Antonio again, but he didn't answer. Desperate, she reached out to Johnny, begging for his help. However, Johnny told her he would respect Antonio's decision and that there was nothing he could do. After Antonio temporarily moved out, Elise found herself alone in the house they had recently bought when they were planning a family. Suddenly, there would be no family, no house, and no husband. Elise realized she would be alone and that she needed to apologize to her husband before the divorce was finalized. Antonio didn't spoken to her for over 8 weeks until they met in the lawyer's office. "I'm sorry and I love you, Antonio. Randy assured me that you would comprehend, particularly when I informed you about the promotion. I apologize, I never imagined you would respond in this manner. Would you kindly pardon me? I promise I never felt anything for him. I did this for us, sweetie, and I've only ever loved you. I need you and I don't want to be with anyone else, so please, please, stop this divorce. Are you not understanding?" When I said, "Let's see if I understand," she felt my anguish and rage when I gazed into her eyes for the first time. You informed me your boss wanted to take you out to dinner 4 weeks before to the celebration. I said no, I won't allow my wife spend time alone with another man, and you replied you understood. 4 weeks later, you're holding his hand as he leads you to his bedroom as I'm forced to watch the woman I loved give herself to another man. She bowed her head as I went on. To make matters worse, he was clearly making his mark on you, letting me know he was the superior guy, and claiming ownership of my wife, as everyone around could clearly see. Then I'm forced out in the cold where I suffer from hypothermia, frostbite, heart problems, pneumonia, and all the while my wife is getting played by another man 30 feet from where I was tied up, I said, bringing Elise to tears once more. And it even gets better. After 10 days in the hospital, the police accused me for something that happened to my wife's lover. Now you sit there looking pregnant, which I assume is his baby, and want me to stop the divorce. Are you out of your mind? Do you think I would take you back, let alone ever touch you again? You disgust me, and I now cringe being in the same room as you. Sobbing, she said, but I never felt anything for him. It was something I just did after he told me that you would understand, because you knew how badly I wanted that promotion. I tried not to get angry, but I couldn't control myself. You knew I didn't want you working in the first place. We didn't need the money, but I let you have your way. So, tell me, were you thinking of me while he saw you on New Year's Eve? New Year's Eve. I will remember your betrayal and what happened to me that night for the rest of my miserable life. How much that hurts and how that will affect me for the rest of my life. Do you have any idea? You get to recall being betrayed and abandoned in a freezing Chicago night. I get to relive having a great time with your lover. You can burn in hell for all I care. We're done. I realized after saying that her religious convictions would forbid an abortion, but she manufactured this mess, so she'll simply have to deal with the consequences of her actions. I urge you get an abortion before it's too late. My angry comments struck her head, causing her tears to fall from her cheeks. I'm not pregnant, she exclaimed. As it turned out, the test confirmed that she was indeed pregnant and that I was not the father. Elise protested when they told her of her fate, but they explained that if she resisted, her entire family back home would be finished in the worst possible way and the family name ruined for centuries to come. Their message was clear: never mess with the family. After several meetings with Johnny, we decided the best course of action was to send Elise back to Sicily to be with her family. Her younger sister Lucia was sent to the United States to replace Elise as Antonio's wife as retaliation from the family for her terrible deed, and he discovered that she was a fiery-tempered, great-timor Elise. The townspeople turned their backs on Elise, and many were afraid to befriend her out of respect for the Marconi family. Elise returned to her small family home to raise Randy's child on her own, as she was shunned by family and friends. With no support, she soon had to find work as a servant and take any other jobs she could find. She lost everything she loved, including Antonio, and cried every night knowing her sister was with the man she would never see again. The opulent life she had once led was gone, replaced by a living hell with no way out, raising a child whose father would never see the outside of a cell. While their relationship was characterized by many altercations, broken dishes, and even police intervention, it always concluded with passionate time spent together. Lucia was fierce and had a fiery Italian temper, unwilling to take any crap from Antonio. While their love life was exciting and they both fell madly in love, Antonio no longer recognized the calm, unassuming Elise. Instead, he now loved a fiery partner even more. Despite their years of fighting like cats and dogs, they raised a wonderful family together. Conclusion: the judge overseeing Randy's case was a family friend who had heard that Randy needed to atone for his transgression and go for maximum suffering. True to his word, the judge seized not only Randy's Ferrari but also his multi-million-dollar home and all of his bank accounts, which the court found were clearly used for ex-trafficking. There was even discussion about additional charges being added to the 20-year sentence. The rat tattoo garnered a lot of attention from the jury and press, and Randy's firm took a step back when they realized who the participants were in Randy's little drama, dropping him like a rock and leaving him swinging in the wind. The man with a huge ego didn't wear that smile he had been renowned for. Even large men are marked in prison, and Randy had numerous from various groups throughout his 20 years in Menard. The rat tattoo was a sign of treason, and his life inside would be horrifying. 1 year following his sentencing, Antonio visited the man in prison, his face twisted upon seeing Antonio, and he vowed to inflict it upon him. They made him sit at the table with his hands and legs, and Antonio sat across from him. "I'll get you for this and make you pay," yelled an enraged Randy. "You have some nerve coming here. You did this to me. You placed those set me up. This is BS. Karma's a beast. So, Randy, tell me, are you happy how your plan played out? You know, the one where you had an affair with my wife and showed me you're the better man. How did that work out?" Antonio said calmly, ignoring his fury. "I see you made some friends on the inside." Antonio smirked at him. "How is their opinion of your tattoo?" "You're welcome, but it's okay that you never thanked us for that." "Randy, we're going to make your life a living hell on the inside," Antonio said, laughing. We've got a lot of friends and family members in there with you, and they promise to hold you accountable for everything you did to me and how you treated my family. He said, one more thing you should know, the mother of your child is living in squalor, thousands of miles away, before getting up to depart. Because of the father's misdeeds, you'll never see them and he will lead a sad life. I want you to consider their suffering each day as a result of your conceit and self-centered behavior, and be mindful of your back. You're going to be somebody's girlfriend, I've been informed. For a single evening with my spouse, consider that each year on New Year's Eve for the remainder of your wretched existence. 6 months later, Antonio and his lawyer were bidding on Randy's estate in a car that the state had put up for auction on the steps of the courtroom. Antonio got his ultimate retribution that day when he won the uncontested auction for pennies on the dollar and took possession of Randy's inheritance and his pride and joy, the red Ferrari. Knowing the right people in Chicago indicates that there are ways to fix an auction. That year, the clerks, the court, and the relevant police officers received a sizable Christmas gift for their consideration of the Marconi family. Antonio made rapid arrangements for a story including pictures of himself and Lucia in front of the car that was parked at the estate to be published in the local newspapers. Along with a brief background of the guys who had owned the land before, the piece greeted them as the new proprietors. Without mentioning any of his misadventures, the novel degraded Randy by depicting him as an idiot and a low-life guy who made money. Knowing that Randy would go mad reading the article so many times now that Antonio owned his estate and loved cars, several copies were delivered to him. Although one of the party thugs lived the rest of his life with a damaged trachea and never entirely recovered his voice. Due to the s***s discovered in his SUV, Bruno was found guilty of. He was sentenced to 15 years in prison and was treated in a manner akin to that of his employer. Antonio's pneumonia from the party left him with some lung damage, and the 2 missing fingertips haunted him every day for the rest of his life after that New Year's Eve nightmare. He essentially erased Lucia's sister Elise from his consciousness, wanting nothing to do with her. But his disregard for Elise and her kid enraged Lucia, which resulted in ongoing hostilities. Antonio realized that he needed to take action to put an end to Lucia's fury after he had to endure multiple fights and being hurled dishes at. When he eventually gave Johnny a call, they decided to reevaluate Elise's circumstances. When Antonio said that Elise would no longer be viewed as a social outcast, Lucia became calmer. They made arrangements for her to work as a paid maid at one of the Marconi residences, giving her the income she needed to buy a house of her own and provide better living conditions for her child. It was a modest act of kindness. After being duped by Randy, she spent the rest of her life thinking back on what she had done and feeling guilt. After thinking about it for a few months, Antonio came to the conclusion that Lucia loved her family just as much as he did. Additionally, he was aware that any further make-up connection from Lucia would cause his pulse rate to increase. He did receive a lovely daughter from Lucia, whom they called Isabella. Following the revelation of Randy's whole narrative, the husbands of 6 of Elise's friends filed for divorce. That one night had enormous consequences that changed countless lives and dominated conversations for years to come. My comment: is this one of the rare moments where OP stands up for himself? Why most men doesn't do that? Comment down below, sub and bell, and I will catch you in the next one.